My name is Edith, I'm 72 years old. And yesterday I emptied my bank account and walked out without saying a word. I just returned from visiting the church's outreach center, helping sick neighbors, doing what I could. But when I got home, my hospital bill was still unpaid. The money I gave my son? Spent on a rooftop party for his wife. When I asked, she laughed. If you make a fuss, you'll never see your granddaughter again. So I packed my cracked teacup, my husband's old wallet, and I left. Even the pastor said he'd never seen a move this bold. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. It wasn't always like this. I still remember how the house used to smell of warm cinnamon toast and honey tea on Sunday mornings. I'd always wake up first, boil the kettle, and place 2 mugs on the counter, one for me and one for whoever would stumble in with sleepy eyes. Usually it was my little grandson, hair-tousled, dragging his blanket behind him. Those were the good years. The quiet years. Back then the house had laughter, real full-bellied laughter. My son Alex would sit by the kitchen window, legs crossed, reading something from his law school days. I'd fold laundry nearby, humming whatever hymn we had sung at service the night before. My hands were slower even then, but he always said I had a way of making a place feel like home. I believed him. But now the air is still. The silence isn't peaceful anymore. It hums with tension. I still boil the kettle each morning, still place 2 mugs on the counter. But no one comes for the second cup. Sometimes I forget and add sugar to both, just like I used to for him. And then it sits there untouched, growing cold. A mirror of how I've started to feel. I try not to cry over tea. It sounds silly when you say it out loud. But I've learned the worst tears don't fall loud. They sting the eyes and stay there, just on the edge of spilling while you keep stirring, folding, smiling, hoping no one notices. Alex married Renee 5 years ago. First I tried to welcome her. She was young, ambitious, and always dressed like she was going somewhere better. I thought maybe that's what he needed, someone to push him, lift him. But not everyone who pushes you wants to lift you. The first few months were fine. She called me Mom for exactly 2 weeks. After that it became Edith. And then eventually just silence. She started forgetting that I liked to go out on Fridays for groceries. Sometimes she left before I was dressed. Other times she brought back food I couldn't even eat. Spicy Thai noodles or frozen shrimp I couldn't chew with my bad teeth. I'd ask gently, "Did you forget I don't eat shellfish, dear?" She'd shrug. "Oh right. Sorry." But there was no sorry in her tone. Just like there was no seat left for me at the table during her book club nights. They'd fill the dining room with women who laughed a little too loudly and poured wine a little too freely. I'd be in the living room with the volume down low, pretending not to notice the glances when I walked in to get water. Once I caught her whispering on the phone, I think to her mother. "She's still here," she said, voice sharp and hushed. "No, we haven't figured it out yet. He won't even talk about it. She's always just there." I don't know what stung more, that she called me still here like I was a stain, or that my son said nothing at all. Because lately, silence has become his favorite language. He used to tell me everything from scraped knees to career plans. But now when I ask how his day went, I get a nod. When I ask if he wants more tea, he says he's cutting down on caffeine. I once stood at the doorway of his office and asked softly, "Are you happy, sweetheart?" He blinked at his screen and said, "Why wouldn't I be?" And that was the end of it. Even my grandson, my little sunshine, has been coached to keep his affection quiet. When I hug him now, he looks over his shoulder first. But not always. Just last week he slipped a drawing under my bedroom door. A picture of me holding a teacup, and him with a cape flying next to me. It said Super Nanny at the top in messy blue crayon. I folded that paper like a treasure and tucked it in my old leather wallet. The same one my husband gave me on our 20th anniversary. When Alex was just 10 and used to race home to tell me about the spelling bee. That wallet. It's held every grocery receipt, every emergency dollar, every photo that mattered. And now, it holds the only evidence I have that someone still sees me. Sometimes I think the hardest part isn't the mockery or the neglect. It's the fear that one day, they'll erase me so gently that even I'll forget I was ever important. I used to think growing old would mean peace. Now I just hope it doesn't mean disappearing. Yesterday I found something odd in the trash. A ripped envelope, half covered in coffee grounds. My name was still visible on it. Edith Collins. and I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was the envelope I had given Alex, with the money for my hospital scan tucked inside. The one we both agreed was urgent. I dug deeper into the bin, my fingers cold and trembling, the smell of old food rising like guilt. The cash was gone. The envelope had been torn deliberately. First I thought maybe it was an accident. Maybe he took it out to pay, maybe it just... But then I saw something else. A glossy party invitation tucked under a newspaper. Rose gold lettering. A photo of Alex and Renee smiling under string lights. You're invited to celebrate our love, rooftop cocktails and catered dinner. The date? The same week I'd handed him the money for my scan. And suddenly everything felt still again. But this time, not the peace of Sunday mornings. No, this stillness was thunder before the storm. And then I saw something else buried deeper in the trash, and my hands started to shake. At first I thought my hands were shaking because of the cold, but I knew better. What I pulled out next, stained with a coffee ring and half crumpled, was the receipt. The bank withdrawal slip, dated 3 days before the party. The exact amount I gave him. Withdrawn in full. I clutched it like it might bite me, my fingers trembling against the paper, the ink smudged but readable. For a moment I stood there in the kitchen, surrounded by rotting banana peels and yesterday's eggshells, and I couldn't move. They'd taken it. Not just the money, the trust, the belief that, despite everything, maybe they still cared. And just like that, a memory rose, uninvited but sharp. 28 years ago. Midnight. The diner's bathroom smelled like bleach and fryer oil. My hands were red and raw from scrubbing trays all evening, and I had just one 10-minute break to eat the half sandwich I'd brought from home. I remember sitting on that cracked linoleum floor, back against the mop bucket, opening the little envelope in my purse. Inside were the tuition papers for Alex's second semester. Due in 3 days. We were short by nearly $600. So I did what mothers do. I took off my gold ring, the one William gave me when he proposed under that crooked oak tree, and pawned it the next morning. When Alex got that acceptance letter, he cried, hugged me and said, "One day I'll buy you a better ring, Mom." I never reminded him of that promise. I never needed the ring back. I just needed the boy who made it. Present day, I folded the bank receipt carefully, walked back to my room, and tucked it into my old wallet. Next to that blue crayon drawing and a photo of Alex at 10 gap-toothed, holding up a trophy twice his size. He used to say, "Look what we did, Mom. You and me, we're a team." Now I wondered when that team had split into sides. That evening I made dinner. Baked salmon with steamed rice, something simple but warm. I used to love cooking, especially when I knew someone would enjoy it. But now it's more muscle memory than joy. When I called them to eat, Renee yelled from upstairs, "We already ordered." Thanks though. No apology. Not even a polite decline. Just dismissal. I sat alone at the table, the candle flickering beside me, and chewed slowly through the meal. Afterwards I cleaned up. The quiet clinking of dishes sounded louder than usual. The kitchen smelled like lemon soap, but it couldn't wash away the tightness in my chest. Around 9 p.m. I went to fold laundry, something mindless, something safe. The warmth of the towels calmed me for a moment. The smell of fabric softener reminded me of when Alex used to bury his face into freshly dried sheets and say, "This smells like heaven, Mom." I smiled at that. But then I heard voices. Stairs. The floorboards creaked, and the hallway vent carried every word like it was meant for me to hear. "She's slowing down," Renee said. Her voice was clipped, impatient. "She forgets stuff. Repeats things." A pause. "You think she's starting to lose it?" she added. And then Alex, my son, my baby, replied in a low, tired voice. "I don't know. Maybe. It's possible. She's older." I didn't drop the towel, but I stopped folding. Possible? He thought I was losing it? I hadn't forgotten that hospital bill. I hadn't imagined her little jabs and sideways insults. I hadn't misheard that expired baggage line she whispered into the phone last week. They wanted me to question myself. That was the game. Renee was good at it. Little slights said with a smile, decisions made without asking, plans changed last minute. She was soft-spoken cruelty wrapped in manicured nails and subtle perfume. But Alex, him, I couldn't explain. Maybe that was the worst part. Not knowing if your child is blind or just unwilling to see. After their conversation, I returned to my room. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat on the edge of the bed, stared at my husband's old photo on the nightstand and whispered, "What would you do, Will?" And as if answering me, the drawer handle glinted. I reached for it. Inside, under a stack of birthday cards and old reading glasses, was a sealed brown envelope. No label, no markings. But I recognized the handwriting again, this time older, shakier. My husband's. I held my breath, slid a nail under the flap, and pulled out a set of documents. Legal ones. And at the very top of the first page was a name I hadn't seen in decades. Bill Carson. Witness and notary. And just like that, I realized my husband had left me more than memories. He'd left me a secret I wasn't supposed to forget. I turned the first page carefully, the paper old but thick, the kind of quality you don't see much anymore. The ink had faded slightly, but the signatures were still legible. My name, Williams. And Bill Carson, the man we hadn't spoken to in over 30 years. I ran my fingers over the embossed notary stamp like it was Braille, trying to make sense of what I was reading. It was a joint property agreement. Not just a marriage deed or a will, but a legal trust. Dated back to 1996. William had transferred half ownership of the house directly into my name before he passed. Quietly. Without telling anyone. I remembered now. A conversation from years ago, muffled by the smell of fresh paint and the sound of a dripping faucet. He'd said, "You never know what people turn into. Papers protect what love can't always hold." At the time I laughed. I thought he was being overly cautious. But William always saw things coming before the rest of us. And now here it was. My name legally tied to this house in a way no one had spoken about in decades. Not even Alex knew. I folded the documents slowly, mind racing, and placed them inside my old leather wallet, right next to the blue crayon drawing and the torn bank slip. That wallet was starting to feel less like a pouch and more like an arsenal. I didn't sleep much that night. Instead, I sat by the kitchen window, sipping bitter tea and watching the night wind twist through the maple trees. The scent of damp leaves crept in through the slightly cracked window. It reminded me of fall mornings when Alex was little. When we'd rake piles together and jump in laughing until our cheeks hurt. I wondered when he stopped remembering those things. Morning came too soon. I got up before anyone else, showered, dressed in soft wool, and made pancakes. His favorite. I needed to see his face. I needed to look into his eyes and confirm what I already knew. When he came downstairs, he barely glanced at the plate. "Thanks," he muttered. I watched him butter one, pour syrup, eat in silence. Then I said, without looking up, "Did the rooftop party turn out the way you hoped?" He froze. Just for a second, barely a blink, but I caught it. "What party?" he asked, playing dumb. I set my tea down gently. I found the invitation in the trash, right underneath the bank receipt. Same day as my hospital bill money went missing. He didn't answer. Instead, he pushed his chair back slowly and carried his plate to the sink like we were talking about the weather. I turned in my seat. "Alex," I said, firmer now, "you told me you'd handle the payment. That it was urgent." He turned around, arms crossed, avoiding eye contact. "I did what I thought was best, okay?" I blinked. "For who?" Before he could respond, Renee walked in, silk robe, full makeup at 8 a.m., phone already in hand. "What's going on?" she asked, yawning theatrically. I stared at her. "You spent my hospital money on cocktails and charcuterie." She didn't deny it. Just smiled and said, "It's not like you're on your deathbed, Edith. You've had that ache for years. You'll survive." And then the words that sliced me more deeply than anything before. "You're not dying, right? So stop acting like your savings are off limits." I stood there, stunned. Even the clock on the wall seemed to pause. She turned to Alex. "Can you handle this? I have to check in with the planner." And just like that, she vanished up the stairs, humming. He didn't chase her. He didn't defend me. He didn't even look sorry. Instead, he said the one thing I never thought I'd hear from him. "Let's just not make this a thing, okay?" Not a thing. The years I spent working overnight shifts. The ring I pawned. The nights I stayed up when he had fevers. The essays I typed for him when his hands hurt. The way I clapped the loudest at every graduation. Not a thing. I couldn't breathe. I had to get out of that house. So I grabbed my coat, stepped outside and walked. No purse, no phone. Just me, the cold air, and the sound of my own heart cracking a little deeper with each step. I wandered the neighborhood like a ghost. A few people waved, I waved back without seeing their faces. My feet moved, but my mind was stuck between memories and disbelief. At one point, I stopped by the old church fence and leaned on it, staring at the crooked steeple. And I said it out loud for the first time. They've turned me into a stranger in my own life. When I returned home hours later, the house was quiet. On the kitchen counter sat a napkin with 3 words, written in Renee's curling script. We ordered out. No apology. No plate left warm. Just that. I walked slowly to my room and sat on the edge of my bed. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just opened my wallet, laid out the drawing, the receipt, the photo, and the deed, and began to plot. But what I didn't know then was that the very man who signed those papers, Bill Carson, was about to walk back into my life in the most unexpected way. A few days later, Renee insisted I come to their small anniversary gathering. Just family and a few close friends, she said. Nothing big. I wanted to say no. Every bone in my body told me not to go. But something stronger than pride pulled me there. A need to see how far they'd really gone, and what they'd become when they thought I wasn't looking. I dressed simply. A soft navy sweater, the one with the pearl buttons that William always said made me look like I was about to give a speech in church. I brushed my hair, dabbed on the same floral cologne I'd worn for decades, and walked into that party with a polite smile. The house was transformed. Fairy lights tangled across the ceiling, glowing gold and blush. The music thumped, not loud, but sharp enough that the bass tickled the floorboards under my shoes. Everything smelled like champagne and lavender candles. Expensive. Curated. Cold. I saw faces I didn't recognize, and some I did. Neighbors, coworkers, women in backless dresses, and men with too much cologne. Everyone smiling too hard. Like they were auditioning for someone else's life. No one noticed me at first. Then someone whispered, "Is that the help?" And chuckled. A few heads turned. One woman, hair piled high like a wedding cake, tilted her wine glass toward me and said, "Oh, you must be Renee's housekeeper." I opened my mouth to correct her, but before I could speak, Renee appeared beside me, wine in hand, and laughed. "She likes to keep busy," she said, smiling as if I were a prop. The crowd laughed, light and polite, but every giggle felt like a slap. And Alex? He was at the far end of the room, nodding to a group of men, holding a drink, pretending not to hear. That was the moment. The exact second I felt something inside me shift. Not snap, not shatter, but shift. Like a door quietly closing behind me. I walked away from the group without a word and found myself in the hallway by the kitchen, trying to breathe. The lighting here was dimmer, softer. The music muffled just enough that I could hear my own heartbeat again. Then I heard a voice I hadn't heard in 3 decades. Edith Collins? I'll be damned. I turned around. There he was, older, silver-haired, but unmistakably him. Bill Carson. My husband's oldest friend. The man who signed our wedding documents. The one who stopped coming around after William passed. He smiled, holding a glass of something dark and neat. "I almost didn't recognize you," he said. "But then I saw the way you straightened your back after that woman's comment. Still got that pride, huh?" I blinked, stunned. "What are you doing here?" "Invited," he said with a shrug. "Apparently, I helped Renee's firm with some contract work. Small world, huh?" I wanted to laugh at the irony. The very man who helped William protect me was now sipping bourbon 3 feet from the woman trying to erase me. He leaned in a little, lowering his voice. "You doing okay?" That nearly undid me. The sheer humanity of that one question, so simple, so sincere. In a house full of people who hadn't asked in years. "I'm managing," I said, my voice thin. He sipped his drink, then said casually, "You know, I recognized my own signature on a deed this morning. William was a smart man." I stiffened. "You remember that?" "Of course. He came to me privately. Said, 'This house needs to be hers as much as mine. I won't always be here.' He was very clear." I looked away, throat tightening. Bill placed his drink down and added, "If you ever want to talk, really talk, you know where to find me." And then he handed me a small card. William C. Carson, attorney at law. Estate and property. He winked. "Not quite dead yet." A laugh broke out of me, uninvited but real. I held the card in my hand, stared at the embossed lettering like it was a key I didn't know I needed. Before I could thank him, I heard my name from the other room. Loudly. Edith. Renee called, sweet as syrup. Come take a picture with the family. I walked into the living room. Everyone was gathered around the cake. A 3-tier monstrosity with gold frosting and pink roses. Someone shoved a champagne flute in my hand. Alex stood beside Renee, arm around her waist, smiling like nothing was wrong. Like this was all normal. I tried to hand the flute back. I don't drink. But someone snapped the photo before I could move. And just like that, there I was, frozen in time, holding a glass of something I couldn't afford beside people who didn't see me, under lights that made everything look prettier than it was. I excused myself before dessert. What would you do if your child laughed while someone insulted you? Sometimes I think grief doesn't always wear black. Sometimes it wears sequins and fake smiles and has your son's arm wrapped around it. That night I didn't cry. I just stood in my room, staring at the photo they printed instantly and placed on the hallway table. Everyone grinning and me in the corner caught mid-blink, holding a glass I never wanted. I reached for my wallet, the leather warm from being close to my skin, and slipped Bill's card inside. Right next to the bank slip. And the deed. And the drawing. And the promise. Because now I had a lawyer, a paper trail, and a plan forming that no one saw coming. The next morning, I left the house early, long before they'd wake. I didn't leave a note. I didn't even take my purse. Just Bill's card in my coat pocket and my husband's watch on my wrist. Its leather band cracked, the ticking soft but steady. I walked. No destination in mind. Just one foot in front of the other. The early autumn air was brisk, biting through the sleeves of my sweater. Leaves crunched under my shoes as I wandered past hedges, fences, old mailboxes I recognized from when Alex was just a boy on a bike with scraped knees and too much imagination. Eventually, I ended up at the little park near the train station, the one with the chipped wooden benches and crooked fountain. I sat down, hands folded on my lap, and looked at nothing. Around me life buzzed, dogs barked, joggers passed. A child laughed at a squirrel. But I was somewhere else entirely. Lord, I whispered, eyes closing. If there's something left in me, show me. Because I'm starting to forget what it feels like to be someone. It wasn't a dramatic prayer. No tears, no theatrics. Just tired words from a woman who had been chipped away one small insult at a time. After a while, I stood and walked down to the old diner on 5th. The place where I once worked the night shift. The smell hit me before the door even opened. Fryer grease, brewed coffee, faint lemon disinfectant. Funny how memories come alive through scent. I didn't sit at a table. I found a quiet corner in the restroom, locked the door behind me, and let myself feel it. All of it. Not loud, not messy, just that kind of breakdown where your body folds in on itself and your hands shake like leaves. I sat on the little bench by the paper towels, pulled out the crayon drawing from my coat pocket, and stared at it. Super nanny, it still said in uneven blue lines. When I finally emerged, I ordered black coffee and left a $5 tip in the jar with trembling hands. The young waitress smiled at me and said, "You okay, ma'am?" And I heard myself say something I hadn't said in a long, long time. No. But I will be. When I returned home later that afternoon, I knew something had changed. My things, my scarves, framed photos, the books I kept near my bedside, were missing from my room. For a moment, I thought maybe I had been robbed. But then I saw the boxes stacked in the basement stairwell, half-labeled and open like an afterthought. I stared at them. Then I called upstairs, keeping my voice calm. Renee. She came to the top of the stairs, barefoot, phone in hand. Yes. Why are my things in the basement? Oh, she said like she'd forgotten. We thought it might be easier for you. No stairs to climb. It's warmer down there anyway. I didn't ask to be moved. She blinked. Well, we did it for you. You're welcome. Then she turned around and walked away. No discussion. No warning. Just removed me from my own space. A quiet eviction. I went downstairs, sat beside the boxes, and looked at everything that used to mean something. My wedding photo. The book I read to Alex every Christmas Eve. My shawl. The one with the little pearls that William bought me in Savannah. Picked it up. It still smelled like the cedar drawer it had lived in for years. And I began to fold it. Slowly, carefully, like it was the only thing I had left that still belonged to me. Later that night, I sat on the edge of the basement cot, my back aching from the cold. I held my husband's watch in my palm, its ticking the only sound in the room, and whispered, "Will, I think I'm ready to do something." The next morning, I opened the drawer of the old desk they had moved down with me, the one William used to keep locked. The key was long gone, but the wood had softened over time. I tugged at the drawer once, twice, and on the third pull it creaked open. Inside I found a yellowed envelope. No label, no markings. I knew that paper. It was the kind of envelope he only used for official things. Documents. Instructions. I reached for it, fingers brushing against the cool paper. And as I opened it, I realized it wasn't just a copy of the deed I'd already found. It was something more. The moment I read the second clause, I knew they couldn't sell this house without me. And that changed everything. The envelope's flap came open with a soft tear, like the quiet exhale of something old waking up. Inside were 3 folded documents, one legal, one handwritten, and one so faded I had to hold it up to the light. The first was the updated trust deed, confirming what the earlier paper hinted at. Not only was I co-owner of the house, but any sale required both signatures. The second was a letter. William's handwriting, shaky but firm. "If you're reading this, Edie, then you've reached a moment I feared. I'm sorry you had to. But remember what I told you. People change, papers don't." It wasn't just advice. It was a warning. A lifeline. The third document was a notarized clause, dated a few months before his death, giving me full legal authority to block, transfer, or donate my share of the property. No expiration. No loopholes. My hands trembled as I laid them all out on the desk. The wood grain scratched faintly at the pages, and the paper felt brittle, like dry autumn leaves, ready to crumble if not handled gently. I could hear William's voice in my head again, just like I had on our porch years ago, sipping tea and watching Alex run barefoot through the sprinkler. "Don't just be nice, Edie. Be ready." He always knew I had it in me, even when I forgot. I stared at those papers for a long time, the ticking of his old watch marking each second like a slow drumbeat. Then I stood up, found my glasses, and began to act. First I made copies. The old printer in the hall closet hadn't been used in years. I wiped dust off the tray, replaced the ink cartridge, and fed the pages through one by one. The machine wheezed and groaned, but it obeyed. Each sheet that came out felt like armor, layer after layer of proof. Then I took out a fresh notebook. I wrote down everything I remembered. The date I gave Alex the hospital money. The date of the party. The overheard conversations. The move to the basement. The insults, the whispers, the wine glass shoved into my hand. I wrote it all, not out of spite but out of clarity. Because when the time came, I didn't want to forget a single moment of how I got here. Around midday, I changed into a clean blouse, tied my hair back, and placed the stack of documents inside a large brown envelope. Then I slipped Bill Carson's business card from my wallet and dialed the number. He answered on the second ring. "William Carson." "It's Edith Collins." A beat of silence. Then, "Edith, I was hoping you'd call." "I found the papers," I said. "I figured you might. Do you have time to meet?" "I'll make time." We agreed to meet at his office that afternoon, discreet, no names on building directories, just a quiet place above a bookstore downtown. I told no one I was leaving. I left the envelope in my handbag zipped to the top. It felt good for the first time in months to walk with purpose. Bill's office smelled like leather and cedar. His desk was neat, his suit crisp, but there was still something kind in his face. Not polished, not pretentious. Just present. He offered tea, and for the first time I accepted. "Show me what you've got," he said, setting the cup down. I handed him the envelope. He read each page slowly, thoroughly. Halfway through he paused, raised his eyebrows, and looked at me with something that almost resembled respect. "This is rock solid, Edith." I said nothing. He kept reading. When he reached the notarized clause, he actually whistled under his breath. "Your husband didn't just protect you. He gave you the wheel." I exhaled. Bill leaned back, folded his hands, and said, "What do you want to do?" "I want to stop pretending I'm fragile," I said. He nodded. "You want to fight back." "No," I corrected. "I want to stand up. There's a difference. Fighting means you're still giving them your energy. Standing means you're finally keeping it for yourself. I want to transfer my share. Not to them. Not to Alex. To someone else. But quietly. Legally. Bill tilted his head. You already know who? I nodded. A place that helps women. The kind who forget they're allowed to take up space. He smiled. I like it. We went over everything that afternoon. He took copies, made notes, and explained what would happen next, how to file the block clause, how to initiate the transfer quietly, and most importantly, how to legally protect myself so they couldn't retaliate. I can handle the paperwork, he said. But you'll need to be smart. I've spent months being quiet. I can spend a few more days being clever. Before I left, I placed one last paper on his desk, my draft will. Simple. Clean. Half the house going to charity. A small sum set aside for one person only, my granddaughter. Smart, he said. Keep it sealed until you're ready. As I stood to leave, he looked at me thoughtfully. You know, he said, a lot of people your age would have just let it happen. Let them win. But not you. I'm not most people, I said, smiling faintly. And I walked out of that office taller than I'd felt in years. But I didn't know Renee was about to say something awful, right in front of the lawyer, that would turn my silent strength into undeniable power. I returned home from Bill's office just before sunset, the sky already bleeding orange and ash across the horizon. In my bag, the legal copies felt heavier than their paper weight, crisp, final, decisive. I moved quietly through the door. No one noticed I was gone. Renee was laughing upstairs, that high rehearsed sound that never quite reached her eyes. Alex was in his office, door closed, light glowing beneath it like a warning sign. The house felt less like a home and more like a theater, where everyone played their parts, and I was the understudy they hoped would never take the stage. I slipped into the basement and placed the envelope under the drawer's false bottom. Then I sat on the cot and stared at the ceiling. The smell of ink from the fresh copies lingered in my nostrils. That and the faint scent of mildew in the carpet made the room feel like a blend of past and present, of things once useful and things slowly rotting. I began to rehearse silence differently. Before, I had stayed quiet out of fear of being pushed further out, of losing the last thread of family I had left. But now I stayed quiet like a woman sharpening a blade in the dark. I let Renee think I was slipping. I left lights on. I paused in the middle of conversations. Once I even said I had forgotten the mail when I had it in my hand. And every time her smile got a little wider. She's really getting bad. I heard her say to Alex one morning, sipping almond milk in the kitchen, we need to start figuring out how to manage things. He didn't respond, just stirred his cereal a little faster. I would have been crushed by that silence once. But now I saw it for what it was, weakness. He was folding in on himself. She was growing bolder. And I was finally waking up. The real crack came a week later. Bill had stopped by to drop off some papers, quietly, just as we'd planned. He posed as a notary handling some health directive updates. And Renee barely looked up from her laptop when he entered. I made us tea out of habit. Sat on the patio, the fall breeze brushing through the hedge like soft whispers. And then it happened. Renee stepped outside, phone in one hand, and didn't notice Bill standing just inside the screen door. She was mid-call, loud, animated. Yes, but legally it's tricky. The old bat still has her name on the deed. Yeah, I know. Shocking, right? She's lived here rent-free for years and still wants to play queen. She paused to laugh. I mean, she'll be dead in 5 years anyway. We can wait. Bill and I locked eyes through the screen. She still didn't see him. I didn't flinch. I didn't speak. She kept going. No, I haven't told her. Why bother? She probably thinks her stupid little teacup has magical powers. And then she finally turned, froze. Saw him. He stepped forward casually, as if he'd only just arrived. Ms. Renee, he said, nodding politely. You do realize slander, when connected to property manipulation, can fall under elder financial abuse in this state? Her face drained. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. I stood slowly and picked up my cup. It was still warm, the floral rim delicate beneath my fingertips. She's getting worse, I said to Bill, loud enough for her to hear. Losing track of who's listening. He smiled. Indeed. She turned without a word and walked back into the house. I didn't need to follow. Her silence told me more than any apology could. That evening the house was tense. Alex came down to the basement around 9. "Hey," he said. "Everything okay?" I looked up from my knitting. A scarf I'd started years ago and never finished. The yarn was soft, pale blue, unraveling slightly from where I'd pulled it too tight. "Why do you ask?" He hesitated. "Renee said she might have upset you earlier." "She says a lot of things," I replied, returning to my stitching. He lingered. "You know we appreciate you, right?" I didn't answer. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't believe it anymore. Instead I said, "I'm tired. Maybe I'll go to bed early." He nodded and left. The next morning I found a letter tucked inside my wallet. It wasn't there the night before. And I know that wallet, I know every scratch, every bill, every fold. This hadn't been slipped in by mistake. The handwriting was small and slightly slanted. I recognized it immediately. My granddaughter. And what she wrote changed everything I thought I knew about the next generation. The letter smelled faintly of lavender. Not perfume, lotion maybe. The kind my granddaughter used when she was younger, after bath time. When she'd run into my arms with damp hair and stories tumbling out of her mouth faster than she could breathe. The envelope had no stamp, no crease. It hadn't been mailed. It had been placed. Secretly. I unfolded the note, my hands trembling more than I expected. "Dear Nanny, I heard what they said. I know they lied to you. I'm not supposed to say anything, but I miss you. I remember your songs. Your tea. The way you never rushed me. Please don't think I don't love you. I do. I really do. Claire." I read it 3 times. And then I wept, not from pain but from relief. Because love hadn't skipped a generation. It had just gone quiet, waiting for a moment to speak. Claire. My Claire. She had slipped it into my wallet somehow. Maybe during one of our brief hugs, or when she'd asked me to help her with a school folder. However she did it, she had done it with more courage than anyone else in that house. I kissed the paper and tucked it back beside the bank receipt, the deed, the drawing, and Bill's card. My little archive of truth. And then I stood up. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't throw anything. I didn't storm the stairs. I just knew in a bone-deep way that I was done watching them live comfortably off the parts of me they'd already broken. It was time to pack. Not to run. To move. To reclaim. I pulled out a small suitcase from under the cot, the one I used when I went to stay with my sister in Illinois back in 2011. It smelled faintly of cedar and old dryer sheets. I aired it out, then began to fill it. First went the wallet. Then the cracked teacup, carefully wrapped in my shawl. The photo of Alex as a boy, and the drawing Claire had made. Super Nanny. A Bible. My good sweater. My medication. And then I sat, staring at the open suitcase, thinking about everything I wasn't packing. Bitterness, anger, shame. They could keep those. I wouldn't need them where I was going. Because now I had a lawyer. A plan. A witness. And more importantly, a reason. Claire had lit the match inside me that would burn down every lie they tried to build over my silence. Before I left the basement, I opened the curtain just slightly. The morning light slid through, soft and gold, landing right across my hands. For a moment I looked down and saw my mother's hands instead of mine, older, worn but steady. She had once told me, "Dignity isn't loud, Edith. It's what you hold onto when no one is watching." Now I finally understood. I left the suitcase hidden under the bed. I wasn't leaving yet. Not until the transfer was final. Not until Claire was protected. But I was emotionally gone. That night over dinner I barely spoke. Renee was too busy swiping through her phone. Alex cleared his throat once, tried to start a story about work, then gave up halfway through. The air between us was heavy, not angry but hollow. Like a house that had been emptied before the furniture was moved out. Later I sat on the porch with my tea, watching dusk slide over the neighborhood. Street lamps flickered. A dog barked 2 houses down. And then the mail truck rolled by. An envelope dropped through the slot. I opened the door, walked down the hallway, and picked it up. It was addressed to me, Edith Collins, in familiar handwriting. But it wasn't from Bill. It was from the courthouse. "Would you forgive, or fight back quietly?" I stood there holding that envelope, heart beating against my ribs like a warning bell. Part of me already knew what was inside. The other part didn't care. I was ready for all of it. But when I opened it, I realized they weren't just trying to control the house. They were trying to erase me from it entirely. The envelope trembled slightly in my hands as I opened it, the thick seal tearing like skin. It was a petition for guardianship. Filed quietly. 2 weeks ago. They were trying to declare me mentally unfit. To strip me of my decision-making rights. To gain full control of the house, my finances, and eventually me. I read the lines 3 times, blinking harder each time. Due to observable cognitive decline. Reported memory lapses, confusion, instability. Family members requesting emergency review for protective oversight. Family. The word felt like poison on the page. I looked at the signature. Alex Collins. Not Renee. Alex. His name. His hand. His betrayal. For a long time I didn't move. The only sound in the room was the hum of the fridge and the faint ticking of my husband's watch on the table beside me. Then, slowly, I folded the document, placed it into my suitcase next to the deed and the letter from Claire, and zipped it shut. This wasn't just insult now. This was theft. Of autonomy. Of dignity. Of truth. And I was done being quiet. The next morning I walked to the hospital alone. I had a follow-up appointment scheduled. One Renee was supposed to take me to, but of course she forgot. It was chilly out, the wind curling through my coat sleeves. I held the strap of my bag tightly as I entered the glass doors, the smell of antiseptic washing over me like a wave of false comfort. The waiting area buzzed with noise, beeping monitors, the low murmur of families, and the clicking of heels across tile floors. I sat in the corner waiting for my name, staring at the reflections in the glass doors. And then I heard it. Edith Collins? I turned and froze. Alex. He was walking toward me, blazer rumpled, face pale, holding something in his hand. I didn't stand. He sat next to me like a stranger trying to make small talk on a bench. I didn't expect you to come, he said. I didn't answer. He glanced around, then leaned in, his voice low. Mom, I can explain. You signed the papers, I said calmly. You lied. His throat moved as he swallowed. It wasn't like that. You called me confused. Unstable. I didn't say unstable, he said quickly. Your lawyer did. Silence. I let it sit there between us. A thick, choking thing neither of us could swallow. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a folder. I got a copy of what you filed. The deed. The transfer draft. The will. He looked up at me. I didn't know about any of it. I swear. You didn't ask. Another silence. People passed by, glanced at us. An elderly volunteer offered me water. I declined with a tight smile. Alex looked at me again, eyes wet now. She told me you were forgetting things. That you'd left the stove on. That you repeated yourself. Did you believe her? Or did you want to? He didn't answer. Instead, he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and for the first time in years I saw my son again. The boy who used to cry when his toy broke. The boy who used to run to me when he had nightmares. I messed up, he whispered. I let her convince me you were fading. That you wouldn't fight back. That we could just wait it out. And take everything. I didn't want to take, he said brokenly. I just didn't want to choose. That was your choice. He covered his face with his hands. His shoulders shook once, then again. And I didn't comfort him. Because this was not that story. This was not the moment where the mother reaches over and says, it's okay. It wasn't okay. I let him cry beside me, like I had once cried on the diner floor, clutching upon receipt. Like I had once stood beside a trash can and pulled out the remnants of trust. Eventually he wiped his face. Claire misses you, he said quietly. She told me about the letter. I nodded. I won't stop her from seeing you, he added. You don't have the right to anymore, I replied. A nurse called my name. I stood up slowly, knees aching. Alex looked up, helpless. What are you going to do? I leaned in. I'm going to take back everything I built. And then I walked away, leaving him sitting there, surrounded by the sterile buzz of a building built to patch wounds. But not all wounds can be patched. Some have to be owned, lived through, scarred over. And when I got home, I did something they never saw coming. I opened the safe. The safe was hidden behind an old bookshelf. One William installed himself the year before he passed. It wasn't fancy, no retinal scanner or high-tech lock. Just a small gray box with a code only 2 people ever knew. Him and me. I hadn't opened it in years. My hands shook slightly as I turned the dial. 3, 7, 2. The latch clicked open. Inside was the velvet-lined interior, still smelling faintly of cedar and dust, like every memory we ever sealed away. I reached in and pulled out the things that mattered. William's will, the original. A set of old photos. His pocket watch. And at the bottom, a small folded paper I hadn't thought about in years. Alex's first drawing. It was a mess of blue and red crayon stick figures with giant heads. On the back, in crooked letters, "Me and Mommy. Team forever." I sat back on my heels and let the years hit me all at once. I saw myself in a diner apron scrubbing dishes, feet swollen. I saw William in the garden wiping sweat from his brow saying, "Save what you can. Trust paper, not promises." I saw Alex in his graduation gown, searching the crowd until he saw me, waving like a child again. And now I saw all of that thrown into the basement like I was an old chair someone forgot to put out for donation. I wasn't sad anymore. Not even angry. Just clear. "They don't get to write my ending," I whispered. I gathered the contents from the safe, the original will, the drawing, William's final note, and laid them carefully in my suitcase next to the copies Bill had made. Every document now had a backup. Every piece of the puzzle was in place. That afternoon I called Bill. "We're ready," I said. He didn't ask for clarification. The next 2 days passed like the slow turning of a key. I went about my chores, washed dishes, took my vitamins, laughed with Claire when she came over to borrow my sewing scissors, clearly an excuse engineered just for a hug. She slipped a note into my hand before leaving. It said, "Friday. I'm bringing you pie. Just us." And I smiled. Not the polite smile they'd grown used to. The real one. The one I hadn't felt on my face in a long time. That night I folded my shawl. The same one I wore the night I took Alex to his first middle school dance, when he was too nervous to ask anyone, so I slow danced with him in our living room. I wrapped it around the cracked teacup, now clean and glistening again, and placed it into a separate box. This wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. The silence I'd lived in for so long, the long sighs, the swallowed tears, the polite nods at cruel comments, all of it had power now, because it taught me how to plan without noise. William once told me, "Lions don't need to roar if everyone knows what their teeth can do." I didn't want to roar. I wanted to move. With precision. With dignity. On Thursday evening, I overheard Renee in the kitchen again. I swear she's losing it. Yesterday she boiled water and forgot to pour it. She laughed. I had boiled the water for my hand-wash delicates. But let her believe what she wants. Delusion is useful when you want someone to be unprepared. Alex had been quiet since the hospital. He passed me once in the hallway, opened his mouth, then closed it again. He couldn't even look me in the eye. Good. Let him sit with that. Friday morning I woke early. Showered. Put on my navy blouse and black slacks. The ones I'd reserved for important days. Court dates, funerals, interviews. Today was an ending. But not mine. As I sipped tea on the porch, real hot tea, no performance this time. The sun spilled over the lawn like honey. Warm. Bright. Undeniable. And then the phone rang. It was Bill. "The filing went through this morning," he said. "They've been served." "They?" I asked. "Your son. And your daughter-in-law. It's all official now. The trust transfer is public. The will is filed. And your new address is protected." I closed my eyes, letting the breeze graze my cheeks. "Thank you, Bill. You did the heavy lifting," he said. "I just pushed the papers." He paused. "You sure you don't want to be there when they find out?" "No," I said. "I want to be somewhere else, somewhere mine." Because by the time they realized what I'd done, I'd already locked the door behind me. They found out on a Saturday. I wasn't home when the papers arrived. I'd made sure of that. Claire had picked me up early for our Just Us pie date. We sat at the diner with chipped mugs and laughed over butterscotch pudding like nothing in the world could touch us. She didn't ask why I looked lighter. But she noticed. "You look." She squinted, trying to find the word. "Free." I just smiled. stirred my coffee. Back at the house, the door slammed before I even stepped out of the car. Renee stood in the doorway, holding a thick white envelope like it had insulted her personally. Her face was red. Barefoot. Rage curling off her like steam from a pot left too long on the stove. Alex trailed behind her. No yelling, no accusations. Just stunned. Pale. "What is this?" she shouted, waving the envelope. I stepped out of the car, thanked Claire quietly and walked toward them. My shoes crunched across the gravel like punctuation marks. "I think it's called justice," I said, voice calm. "You gave away your half of the house?" she hissed. "To some charity?" I shrugged gently. "A local women's shelter trust. One that provides housing for mothers who've been displaced." It felt appropriate. "You can't do that," she barked. "You live here." "Correction," I said, pulling the keys from my pocket. "I lived here." Alex stepped forward. "Mom." I turned to him and for once he looked me straight in the eye. "She left me in the basement, Alex," I said softly. "Like a forgotten box of family photos. You helped her pack me away. I didn't mean for this to happen. But it happened." He opened his mouth, closed it again. Claire appeared at the edge of the driveway, arms crossed, not saying a word but standing there like a line in the sand. "You're going to regret this," Renee snapped. "No," I said. "I regret letting it go this far. I regret not listening to William sooner. I regret believing that love alone would be enough to make people do the right thing." "You're sick," she spat. I took a step closer, dropped my voice low. "No, Renee. I'm awake." I handed Alex a small envelope. Inside is the original deed, the receipts, the notarized will, and a letter from your father. Use them however you need. But know this, your name isn't on any of it. It never was. He didn't take it. So I set it gently on the porch rail and turned to leave. Bill had helped me move into a small cottage just outside town. A one-bedroom with white shutters, a vegetable patch, and a porch swing that creaked in the wind like it was telling secrets. The keys jangled softly in my hand as I opened the door for the first time. It smelled like paint and pine. Fresh. New. Mine. I unpacked slowly, the teacup on the shelf, the photo of young Alex on the mantel, Claire's drawing above my writing desk. The cracked shawl, the old wallet, the watch. Each one placed like a stitch in a quilt I was finally allowed to make with my own hands. Later that week I planted the first flowers William ever gave me, crimson dahlias. The soil was dark, rich, warm against my palms. As I pressed the seeds into the ground I whispered, "We're still growing, Will. Even now." On Thursday, Claire came over after school with a slice of cake in a paper box and a stack of library books under her arm. "This is nicer than our house," she said, flopping onto the porch chair beside me. "That's because it's filled with peace," I replied, pouring her tea. She sipped carefully. "I told Dad I wanted to stay here this weekend." I looked at her surprised. "And what did he say?" "He said it's up to me. That he understands now." I said nothing, because sometimes silence says enough. That evening, as the sun poured orange light through the kitchen window, and the scent of fresh mint and soil drifted in from the garden, my phone buzzed. A number I recognized. Renee. I let it ring twice, then answered. "Edith," she began, her voice tight, cold. "Can we talk?" I leaned against the counter, the warm mug in my hand grounding me. "I don't think there's much left to say," I replied. "There has to be something we can work out." And there it was, the shift. From arrogance to desperation. From power to panic. I let the silence hang for just a moment too long. And then I said, "Only if you can say the one word you've never meant in your life, sorry." Renee didn't say sorry. She never could. Not without choking on it. So I ended the call with the same poise I'd once used to close the diner till at 2 a.m. after a double shift. Calmly, cleanly, without ceremony. No fireworks. Just a click. And silence. The next few days passed like slow-moving clouds, soft, steady, untouchable. I planted more dahlias. Cleaned the cupboards. Made lemon shortbread with Claire, who now visited me every weekend like clockwork. Each time she stepped into the cottage, she took off her shoes, put her bag on the same chair and said, "It smells like peace in here." I smiled every time, because it was true. It smelled like warm pine floors, tea leaves, and freedom. On a Sunday morning the doorbell rang. It wasn't Claire. It was Alex. He stood on the porch in a windbreaker, holding a paper bag and a thermos. For a moment he looked like the boy who used to bring me wildflowers from the schoolyard. Crushed and crooked but full of meaning. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside. He set the bag on the counter, pulling out 2 apple fritters, the kind I used to buy him when he aced a test. He poured coffee into 2 mugs without asking, handed one to me. I didn't speak, just watched him carefully. He sat down across from me, elbows on the table, eyes raw. "Claire told me what you did for her," he said. I sipped my coffee. "She did more for me than I could ever repay." He nodded, then pulled something from his pocket. A photo. Me, holding him on his college graduation day. We were both smiling, real smiles, not the kind you pose for. "I forgot who I was back then," he said. "No," I corrected gently. "You just stopped remembering who we were." A pause. "She's leaving me," he admitted. Renee said I'm spineless. I raised an eyebrow. "She's not entirely wrong." He laughed, then caught himself. "I deserve that." More silence. Then from his jacket he pulled out a small box. "I found this in the garage. Thought you should have it." I opened it slowly. Inside was a new teacup, simple pale ivory, with a gold rim and tiny roses painted near the handle. Not a crack in sight. "It's not an apology," he said. "It's just something unbroken. Something that might still hold warmth." My throat tightened. I didn't cry, but I let my hand rest over his for a moment, because forgiveness doesn't always come wrapped in words. Sometimes it comes in silence that feels a little less sharp. Later that afternoon, Claire and I walked to the garden together. She held my hand, not because I needed help but because she wanted to. We sat on the porch watching bees float lazily between blossoms, the air thick with the scent of rosemary and earth. "Dad said he might get a small apartment," she said. "Just him. No yelling." "That sounds nice." She looked at me. "Can I come here on the weekends still?" I pulled her close. "You can come whenever you like. You're home here." That evening I took out a folder from the drawer and reviewed it one last time. Title: Property Deed, Collins Cottage. Sole owner: Edith M. Collins. Purchased with legal funds from trust transfer. No liens. No cosigners. No heirs listed yet. It was the final twist. The house I'd built had betrayed me, but the one I chose stood on my terms. No basement. No silence. No games. Just fresh walls, blooming soil, and peace you can't fake. "If your child betrayed you, would you open the door again?" I set the deed back in the drawer, right beside Claire's crayon drawing and William's watch. Then I brewed one more cup of tea. Not from habit, but from ritual. And for the first time in months I didn't drink it alone. But before the sun set, one last visitor came to my door, and what she asked stunned me into silence. The knock was soft, like someone testing whether they deserved to be heard. I wiped my hands on my apron, still dusted with flour from the peach tart Claire and I had baked that afternoon, and walked to the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, she stood there in heels too high for gravel and a coat too thin for September wind. Renee. Makeup perfect. Hair pulled tight. And yet everything about her looked tired. "Edith," she said, voice almost civil. "Can I come in?" I didn't answer immediately. I simply looked at her. She clutched her purse tighter, searching for the right script. "I just want to talk. About the house. About Claire. About what happens next." I leaned against the doorframe. "There is no next, Renee. Not here." Her mouth twitched. "You can't just cut people out." I raised an eyebrow. "You wrote me out of my own life, remember? You moved my things to the basement. You laughed when I was insulted in public. You tried to label me mentally unfit. I thought." "No," I interrupted gently. "You knew. You just didn't care." She looked away. The breeze picked up, rustling the wind chimes on the porch. The scent of rosemary and clay drifted through the air, grounding real. Finally she said, "I lost him, you know. Alex was never yours to keep. He was just too afraid to tell you that." She blinked quickly, the only crack in her perfectly powdered face. Then voice low, "I never thought you'd actually win." "I didn't win," I said quietly. "I reclaimed." That's different. Renee took a deep breath, then reached into her bag. She pulled out a manila folder. I was hoping we could renegotiate. I didn't even touch it. You're not welcome here, I said, gently but firmly. And you never were really. I just kept the door open too long. She hesitated, then turned, heels clicking down the steps like punctuation marks in a losing argument. I watched her go, not with hate, not with satisfaction, just with clarity. Because not every storm needs thunder. Some storms are just doors closing softly. That evening, rain began to fall, slow, steady, healing. I sat by the window in my favorite chair, the one no one ever dared reserve for me back in their house. Here it was mine by default. The new teacup sat warm in my hand, steam curling upward in soft spirals. Claire was curled beside me with a book, legs tucked under her, humming faintly to herself. The old radio played Billie Holiday low in the background. I glanced at the wall above the mantel. The framed photo, Alex at 10, his arms around my neck, both of us laughing. I didn't remove it. I just added one beside it. Claire and me in the garden, muddy hands and bright eyes. Then and now. Both parts mattered. As the rain thickened, I reached for my journal. Wrote one final line. Marjorie's house lives again. That was what we used to call the place when William and I first moved in, back before Claire was born, when I'd host church brunches and plant too many roses in the spring. He used to say, "This house won't just hold things. It'll grow people." That's what this new house was now. A home not for history but for legacy. Before bed, I poured the rest of my tea onto the garden soil. Not wastefully but like a prayer. Quiet thank you. The storm had washed away the old, and something new was beginning. I lost my family's roof, but I found my own sky.